Fran Graham. Welcome to the Gravity Podcast.
Thank you, Chris. It's good to be here.
Wow, this has been a long time coming. You and I are both very busy people, but I'm really excited just based on your background and the conversations that you and I have already had.
Mhm.
I'm excited for the experience you have and the wisdom that I think you have for our first responder listeners. If you don't mind, just for folks that have never heard your name, if you don't mind just introducing who you are.
Okay, no, I'd be happy to. Thank you. My name's Fran Graham. I am obviously not from the US. I currently live in Montana, but I'm from the UK, former police officer, and now work extensively with disaster relief organizations, fire and police organizations, sometimes the military, to basically help them with trauma intervention, trauma care, self-care, and trauma response.
How long have you been doing that work?
Oh gosh. Officially, I would say 14 years.
Wow.
Unofficially, I would say 20 years.
Yeah.
In other words, I lost my career as a UK police officer due to trauma on the job that wasn't handled well, wasn't managed well. And as a result of that, chose to figure out a way to give back to first responders, primarily law enforcement, because that's my background, but any first responder in need of help. And so I just, life changed in such a way that I made a decision to do what I could to make sure that other first responders did not end up losing their careers prematurely due to unmanaged stress. Whether that's stress on the job, stress at home, it all combines together to create
Yes.
a massive mess, doesn't it? So yeah, I just started learning and getting educated, and I say 20 years ago because actually what happened was this: when I lost my career in the UK, my husband, who is a US citizen, former US military, who was stationed in England, said, "You know what? I think it's time we move back to the States." And so we did. We moved to California, and it was when we got to California that I ended up working for a local PD, police department, as a civilian. And that's when I really learned to see the difference between US policing and UK policing.
Yeah.
And I realized the not only the style of policing was very different here, but the nature of the calls for service were very different compared to the rural farm town country community that I had been policing in. And so I thought, wow, the chances and the likelihood for US first responders in those days, and this is 24 years ago now, 20 years ago, was much more, US responders were much more likely to suffer the effects of critical incident stress on the job than some of our officers in the UK. So it really was important to me to get educated and to get through a lot of the trainings I ended up doing so that I could help. That's it in a nutshell. I just wanted to help to make sure they didn't end up the way I did.
Yeah. I do have some UK and Canadian listeners, but the majority are here in the US. Could you paint that picture for us? Tell us the contrast, and maybe it's changed now, but definitely the contrast from when you were serving as a police officer in the UK and then coming to California and seeing the difference.
Yeah, there is so much contrast. And as you said, and I'm glad you mentioned that, we're talking about 20 years ago. And a lot has changed since then.
Yeah.
So in England, for most of your listeners probably don't know, because I get asked this all the time, the rural police departments in England, actually they're called constabularies. The rural constabularies in England are not armed. We don't carry guns. So that right there is an immediate change in conflict resolution, isn't it? Because
Totally.
we in England, we have our ASPs, our extendable batons. We had our hands and we had our mouths. Now they use tasers, which I didn't have when I was an officer. So it's very much conflict resolution using communication skills. And if it escalated, then we had to effect control of the situation by either escalating our tone of voice or our body posture, our body language, and if necessary, using force. But to us, force in those days was a bit of hand-to-hand combat with an asp and some handcuffs. And so we never were in that position where we could, draw our weapon to effect control. So it lessened the stress around the whole situation. Whereas here, more people are armed here. There are more guns here, obviously. I mean, you imagine the country of England, you can fit into Washington state maybe 1.5 times. And so to police a country that's small is quite easy to have gun control. And back in those days, most of the attacks of choice were knife attacks. So our life here, law enforcement here, is just so very different. People here are more likely to be armed. And so that immediately puts an officer more on the defensive, rightfully so. They have weapons to draw upon that we just didn't have in those days. What we did have was called an ARV. Our constabulary had an armed response vehicle. We actually had two. We had one in North County, one in South County, and that was the armed vehicle where you could say it was our SWAT team. But if they were on another call and you needed them, you had to wait for that call to wrap up before they even started heading your way, and they could be an hour away. And that actually did happen once. We were in a hostage situation and we were waiting for the ARV and they were on another call an hour away. And so you have to have other resources in your pocket when you're dealing with that kind of stuff. But but to get back to your question, what's the difference? The nature of the stress levels here, from the time you even say you're pulling a vehicle over, from the time you're pulling a vehicle over, here in this country, the likelihood of them being armed and potentially being aggressive is very heightened compared to in the UK, where I was working. And I'm not talking about London. The center of London, the Metropolitan Police is very, very different. I'm talking about rural England. So it's much calmer. It was much quieter. We had our murders and our assaults and our burglaries and our, traffic violations, but generally it was just very different. So it wasn't as scary. It really wasn't as scary. And so when I came here, several people said, well, you're young enough. Why don't you be a cop here? And I'm thinking, oh, heck no. I love to shoot and I do have guns, but I'm not going to have one with me at work. That wasn't my level of policing experience. And I didn't ever want to get into that. So it's chalk and cheese. It's so very different. And I have such respect for law enforcement around the world. But especially that, I've worked alongside law enforcement now for 20 years in a support role as a chaplain or as a peer support specialist, as an instructor for critical incident stress management. And I have so much respect for the officers here. And I just, my heart goes out to them, the stuff they have to deal with. And obviously we know, you and I both know in the last 5 years, the stuff's just got worse. The world is just becoming more difficult to live in, more difficult to police. And, that goes for firefighters and first responders, frontline medical staff in hospitals and dispatch. It's just getting darker. And so the needs for people who are well-trained to come alongside first responders of any discipline is so crucial at this time.
I agree. Absolutely. With those differences, and maybe you weren't aware of it at the time, but while you were serving in England, what were the calls that got under your skin that negatively impacted you? I mean, there's so many different analogies we can use.
Yeah.
But what were
some
some
of
of those
question.
What were some of those ones that led to you leaving the job earlier than planned?
That's a really good question. And I'm going to answer that in two ways, Chris. It wasn't just the job. As I mentioned earlier, if we don't understand the impact that our personal lives have on us, first and foremost, right? Our home life, our family life, our personal ability to manage our personal stress well is crucial. The job just adds on top of that. And so within my work within first responders, generally when I work with them as a sort of a mental health, I'm not a therapist, I need to clarify that, but I do work within mental and emotional health fields. And so I I find a lot of people mismanage their personal stress. And so a lot of times in first responder world, we focus so much on the stress on the job, and absolutely it is so heavy.
Yeah.
But it's never just about the job, or it's rarely just about the job. So for me, what was happening in my personal life was that in the UK, in the constabulary that I was working for at the time, we had a 5-week rotating shift pattern. And that 5-week rotating shift pattern repeated every 6 weeks. So within that 6 weeks, my body clock had to go from earlies to days to lates to swings to night shift.
Oh
And
my
then we have a
gosh.
week off. And then you start again, earlies to days to lates to swings. So from 6 a.m. through till midnight, you're starting at different staggered shifts, and you repeat that every 6 weeks. So you can imagine what that does to any first responder. I mean, sleep deprivation for us as first responders is probably one of the number one problems. So that was happening anyway. So I was fatigued all the time. Now, on top
Yeah.
of that, at home, we had 4 boys under the age of, I think at that point, 10.
Wow.
And Rob, my husband, Rob, was working out of town. So I was juggling
Oh my gosh.
the kids at home on my various sleeping patterns. We couldn't afford childcare. And that, on top of the nature of the job and the things we were dealing with at work,
Yeah.
was really hard. Added to that in those days, and I don't know what it's like here because I've never served as a female officer here, but I have lots of female officer friends, and we've had these conversations.
Yeah.
In those days, it still very much was a man's world.
Yeah.
So here I am, a young mum joining at the age of 35 with 4 small boys at home. And my husband, who was a manager in a different company and was just gone a lot, I had to be pretty tough to try and keep up with the boys, not the boys at home, but also the boys at work, right?
Yeah, totally.
But I had to be really tough to keep up with them, and it was hard, and honestly, on top of all of that, I am a woman of faith. I follow the Christian faith, and I really struggled, honestly. I was just chatting to a friend about this yesterday, another police chaplain. I really struggled as a cop in England to be true to who I was. And what I mean by that is this: I believed that anybody I came into contact with, no matter their background, no matter the color of their skin, no matter their gender, what it was, I believed that everybody has a second chance.
Yeah.
And so I would always approach them with that mentality, with respect, with kindness, with gentleness. Unless they, kicked off or escalated, then of course I would change my approach. But I would always try and approach everybody with that love and that compassion, because they're a human being.
Yeah.
And I would be so ridiculed by my colleagues, and
Yeah.
I get it. I really do get it, but I had to be true to myself.
Yeah.
So there's that element. There's also the element, to answer your questions, what kinds of calls for service did we have? The ones that stick in my brain are honestly not gruesome. They're not gruesome, but they were very, very painful to me because they knocked against my values, my beliefs.
Yes.
So one that immediately comes to mind was one involving children. I had been called to go to a house because there was a domestic situation going on, and the parents obviously were arguing and fighting. And as any police officer knows, when you get to a domestic situation, we have the problem with triangulation, don't we? So the partners end up pitting together against us. So I got there, and I was trying to be very careful to assess the situation and figure out, who was going with me, if anyone was. And what ended up happening was we ended up having to call in child protection services, and we actually had to remove the children from the home that evening. And I was one of the officers that had to carry a screaming 2 or 3, I think actually the little girl was 3. She was terrified. She was absolutely terrified, and she was screaming, and her mum was screaming, and I had to remove her and her brother, together with other officers that had come to the scene at that point, had to remove them from their home. And when you are trying to protect children, but at the same time breaking up a family. It
Yeah.
is so painful to be that person, especially as a police officer. We want children to grow up trusting us. But when that child is going to remember that a person in uniform took her away from her family or took him away from his family as an act of safety, then
Yeah.
they are not going to recover from that very well. And
Yeah.
so that kind of thing broke my heart. There was another time when I was responding to a scene of a suicide. A man had jumped off. He had tried to hang himself, but the rope from the bridge wasn't tied properly. So he landed on the pavement of the road below. And it was really, really early morning. And I was basically the only officer there guarding the body until we could get the coroner out. And I think it was a really cold English, gray, wintry morning. It was bitterly cold. And it was silent. I mean, the city wasn't beginning to wake up yet. And I'm on a hill, and this man's in front of me. His eyes are wide open, and he's hit the ground. And it was really eerie. It
Yeah.
was just so eerie. His eyes are open, they're staring off. He's hit the ground. He has a head injury because he's fallen a long way. And it's just me and this body. And at one point, I'm thinking, this is surreal. I'm standing here on this cold British country road with this body in front of me, just guarding it, making sure no one came to disturb the scene. And I must have been there for what seemed like an hour. It probably was only 15, 20 minutes. But it's that image when you can't get that image of this body on the ground and the blood trickling down the cold road. And it's just stuff like that. And there was a hostage situation I mentioned earlier. That was really hard for me, actually. I was, from memory, and again, from memory, this is over 20 years ago, so it's hard sometimes to remember. But I was one of the first officers on scene in this hostage situation. And in England, we don't carry guns, right? So in this situation, we had an annoyed, upset former boyfriend who had been jilted by his girlfriend, and he had been in jail for assault. And he had got out of jail and went to her house and wanted to basically speak to her, and it just didn't go well. So he ended up taking her up into an upstairs bedroom and held her at knife point and kicked the rest of the family out of the house, held her at knife point, and she had her up against the window. The window was open at the upstairs bedroom. He had her up against the window, was standing behind her, and he had the knife to her throat, and he was screaming out of the window that if the family didn't get out and if she didn't come with him, he was going to end her life. And I was one of the first officers on scene, and you've got the members of the public gathering, screaming and yelling at you because you're not doing anything.
Yeah.
Well, in our protocols, you can't do anything. It's not like we had guns to point at him.
Yeah.
I couldn't go in because we had to wait for the hostage negotiator to come first. But the members of the public don't understand that. The
No.
family, who are absolutely traumatized and petrified, they don't understand that. So you've got these people yelling at you because you're not doing anything. And yet you have to follow protocols, right? You have to follow procedures because you're thinking of your own safety, you're thinking of their safety, you're thinking of the safety of the man and the woman in the bedroom, and you've got to assess all of this, and yet you've got this angry mob getting really, really elevated and escalated, and that went on for such a long time. And it's just those things where you have no control. It's that sense of loss of control. It's
Yeah.
that feeling of helplessness and hopelessness that we all talk about that are precursors to PTSD. And so it was lots of things like that, together with my fatigue, together with the fact that I just wasn't sleeping. And after weeks and weeks of no sleep, we all know what that feels like. It depletes our capacity to even function at work. So it was a combination of all kinds of things. Plus, I think one of the biggest things for me at the time in our police station, you would hear the conversations in the break room all the time about how if you can't handle the job, in other words, if you get stressed, you don't deserve to wear the uniform.
Yep.
And I think for me, that was the most damaging stab in my back, because I was in an environment where you were taught by these conversations in the canteen or in the break room that if you had any struggle with any stress, you weren't a good officer and you didn't deserve to be called a police officer. You
Yeah.
didn't deserve to wear the uniform. And they would mock and ridicule police officers that had lost their careers due to stress
Yeah.
caused by the job they do. And it was the culture back then. And in many organizations, it still is the culture now, unfortunately. But one of my angles that I wanted to change was that, just changing people's attitude. So when I started feeling that I wasn't managing well at work, I immediately knew I couldn't talk about it because number one, I wasn't going to be taken seriously. Number two, I was going to be mocked and ridiculed. And number three, there's the guilt and shame, isn't there?
Yeah.
Of not being able to cope with the stress of the job, of not being able to be there to support your colleagues,
Yeah.
of being the weak link in the crew. And that's a strong pull. That guilt and that shame
Oh, yes, it
is
is.
such a strong pull that it prevents you from ever opening your mouth to say, I'm really struggling here.
Yeah.
And there was no provision of any care, there was no provision of any support. And so I just kept my mouth shut,
Yeah.
as we do, right? You just keep your mouth shut and you just keep going. Well, one day I went to put my uniform on and I could just feel myself physically shaking. And I thought I couldn't understand what was wrong. I couldn't put my finger on what was wrong. I had no understanding of post-traumatic stress or a personal experience of post-traumatic stress injury or critical stress, whatever the language is people use nowadays.
Yeah.
I didn't understand that was a thing. I just knew that I wasn't coping well. And I didn't even recognize it was stress. Honestly, I just felt off. I was
Yeah.
off kilter. Something wasn't right. So when I put my uniform on, I would start physically shaking. And I remember one day I went to my sergeant and I said, Sarge, I don't know what's wrong, but I'm just not coping well. My brain was shutting down. I noticed that when in those days when we were called by dispatch to respond to something, dispatch would look at where the cars were and they would call your specific call sign and assign you to that, rather than here they often say, this is what's happening, who's available, sort of thing.
Yeah.
um, you were called and told to go, and I started to notice I was ignoring the calls, which no good officer would ever do. You don't ignore a call when dispatch is calling you to respond to something. And when I say ignore, I wasn't not answering, I was just not quick to reply.
Yeah.
So it was like, oh my gosh, they're calling me, can I handle this? And I had to talk myself up to replying, whereas before it was, yep, I'm on it. So it was
Totally.
those subtle changes I noticed, and I'm thinking, what the heck is going on? So I'd spoken to my sergeant and I said, I don't know what's going on, but I'm struggling with these things. And not because he was unkind, not because he wasn't a good sergeant. He just, as most of us didn't in those days, he didn't know any better. And his
Yeah.
reply was, Fran, we all struggle with the same things. Get back on duty. And that was
Yeah.
his reply.
Yeah.
So what did I do? I trusted him. I didn't know any different. So I went back on duty. And this continued on for several more months to where eventually my brain was so fried, I couldn't even think straight. I
Yeah.
would go to the police station, I would put on my uniform, I would sit at the computer, and my brain would just go numb. I mean, there was just nothing left inside. And so I went to my chief inspector because the sergeant wasn't necessarily going to want to hear from me again. So I went to my chief inspector, and he had one look at me when I walked in, and thank goodness for him. He was such an understanding man. He knew exactly what was going on. He told me to go and see the doctor, and just actually the first thing he said was, which spoke volumes to me, was he said, go and take your uniform off right now. Just go take your uniform off. Then I want you to take some time off, go and see the doctor. And so I did. But what the doctor did was put me on Prozac. Okay, nothing wrong with that. But I was put on Prozac and told to rest. I definitely needed the rest because I'd had no good sleep for months. The
Yeah.
Prozac certainly helped in that season. But I was never given any official counseling. I was never given
Yeah.
any intervention services. I was never given any resources. I just had to go and rest and take the Prozac. And that helped to a certain extent, but it didn't deal with all of the issues that caused the
No.
problem in the first place.
It took away
And
the intensity of
it
the
did.
right then.
Yeah,
But again,
it did.
you still have the injury, right? Just because it stops
Absolutely.
hurting, just because my knee stops hurting, doesn't actually
Right.
mean that I've healed it.
Right. And I think what was more damaging in those days, though, Chris, was that no one from the police department called me to follow up on me.
Yeah.
And yet you think they're your friends, and they are if you turn up to work. But as soon as you're that police officer that's gone off with stress, and I'm not saying this is how they felt towards me, this is how I perceived their opinion of me. As soon
Yes.
as I stop hearing from them, I then think, okay, well, I'm now in the doghouse with all of the other officers who went off with stress. They were right. I don't deserve to wear the uniform. I've let them down. Somebody now has got to cover my shift. They're all extra stressed and extra worked because I'm not there. And so you then go down this
Shame, more
spiral
shame,
of guilt and
more
shame.
shame. Yep.
And it just broke me. It just broke me. I was so stung by the guilt and the shame.
Yeah.
And the only time anyone from the police station called me was probably about 5 months in, when a sergeant called me to say, Fran, per our policies, we're only going to cover you for full pay for 6 months. You either come back to work or we have to cut your pay. And financially, we couldn't afford to lose my pay. So what did I do? Went back to work. And as you just said, the problems were still there.
Yeah.
I went back on light duties. So I started with paperwork. And I hated that because you go back and you're on light duties and people are looking at you sideways. Oh, she's back. Let's see
Yeah.
how she's going to cope with this. And again, these people were my friends, and I'm not blaming any of them. It was the culture.
It was the
It was the
culture
it was the
and the
culture. And
narrative running through your mind
yes,
based on what
exactly.
they're not saying. Yeah.
Exactly. So I went back on light duties and I started with paperwork, and that was great. By the time I got back on patrol, which was probably about a month later, I crashed again very quickly because, as
Yeah.
you said, that the injury was still there. And at that point, actually, as much as I was devastated to feel this way at that point, I really felt God say to me, this season is over. I've got other things
Clarity.
for you to do.
Yes.
Very, very
Clarity.
clear. But it broke my heart.
Yeah.
I grieved the premature loss of a career I loved and I wanted to be good at.
Yeah.
I grieved that for about 15 years. It was very, very, very heavy and very hard. But
Yeah.
the redemptive part of my story is that I didn't know that a year later that it was in our destiny to move back to the US
Yes.
within the next year. And so we moved our whole family to the US. And before I knew it, I was working in a local police department as a civilian, helping in investigations and helping out in dispatch. And immediately saw, okay, I can do something about this.
Yes.
I can be an answer to the problems that I'm still healing from, and this is how I can do it. And that's what's so amazing about this country compared to England, although things are changing,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
But at that time, we moved here in 2002, and at that time, there was already a great move towards peer support and critical incident stress management training and fire and police chaplaincy. And so that I saw that as my destiny, and I got involved almost straight away. And it's just been a phenomenal way for me to give back and to make sure people don't end up like me, broken officers. But I see my life now as very exciting, very redemptive. And there's nothing we go through in life that can't be used for good, right?
Oh, amen.
And so, if the word even says what the enemy plans for our destruction, the Lord turns around for the good, for those who love
Yes.
him and trust him and serve him. So it is very redemptive. I'm so humbled, honestly, Chris, I'm so humbled and privileged and excited and blessed to do what I do now. I mean, I travel around the world now teaching peer support and trauma intervention classes to audiences that I would never have dreamed of. Honestly,
Yeah.
I'm blown away by the invitations I get. But my biggest passion is coming alongside first responders here in the US and building up peer support teams and counseling them and mentoring them and training chaplains. And it's just like I've completed the circle. You know, I've come through these
Yeah.
seasons in life, and I learned so much. I learned so much in what I do and with the people I work with, and I love them. I love so deeply, and I just love the first responders I get to come alongside, and I'm so proud of them. They are they are fighting on the front lines in a world that is
Yes.
so different to mine 20 years ago. And
Yes.
I'm thankful I'm not a police officer now. I really am thankful I'm not a police officer now, because that's not the kind of police career I wanted.
Yeah.
And you know, the things have changed in the world, and so policing now is very different. Chaplaincy now is very different. The calls we get now as chaplains for first responders is very different to 5, 10 years ago. So even the training I provide for chaplains is having to be updated to be more relevant with the stuff
Totally.
that's happening in the world today.
Yeah. Yeah, preparing them for that. There's so many. Wow, your story. I'm glad you answered it the way you did. You could have just answered a very simple question, but you really painted a true picture. And when I say true, your story and my story have so many correlations.
They do.
And so you really said it well. One of the things that popped out, one thing I kept coming back to, or I felt like your story kept coming back to, is part of why you were looked negatively upon for the way you engaged the public. Part of why people weren't
Mm-hmm.
talking to you when you were gone or when you were on light duty. And I can tell you, even from my perspective, I want to move people into them. I want to move society. I remember a call I went out on, a domestic. I don't think we arrested anyone. I don't think a crime had taken place, but there were, an argument. And we get out there and it's like 2 in the morning. And I got a
Mm-hmm.
6 year old sitting on the couch with his sippy cup
Yeah.
watching MTV, right? Like watching something
Wow.
that I feel embarrassed that's on the TV screen right now. And,
Yes.
and due to just how provocative it is. And I'm sitting there thinking, this young person doesn't know any different. And-
Right.
But here's the beauty of that. I mean, yes, we put people into others because it makes us feel safer.
Yeah.
If the fentanyl epidemic is something that happens to them, it can't
Yes.
touch me or my family. I feel safer. If all of a sudden one of my daughters starts using fentanyl, then my life is oh my gosh, crisis, right? I'm afraid that she'll
Yeah.
die with
Yeah.
the next hit. And the
Yeah.
same thing goes with this wellness conversation. If officers that can't
Yes.
come back to the job are just weak and they can't cut it,
Yeah.
it makes me feel a little bit less vulnerable that I'm not going to catch this disease.
Right. Yeah.
So I see why they do it. But here's what I love though, Fran, and I hope the listeners heard this. That same love that you had for the community, that you had
Mm.
for seeing people where they were,
Mm-hmm.
you now are projecting that towards our first responders, not just here in
Yeah.
America, but it sounds like around the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
And so that same degree of love is now pointed towards them of I want
Mm-hmm.
to help this problem and I want to make it better for you
Yeah.
so that
Yeah.
you don't have to cut your career short like you did, like I did,
Right.
right?
Yes.
Like yes,
Yeah.
that happened but I don't think it has to happen. We just have to get better at training
Right.
our folks how to manage stress.
It's so true. It is so true. And the reality is, Chris, and I appreciate you bringing that up. The reality is we have to learn to love ourselves first. You know, the love we give out to others. You know, when I'm teaching and when I'm training, I ask people this question, and you and I might have already talked about this because I know we've had several conversations. But one of the things I ask people when I'm doing training, whether it's to a faith-based group or whether it's to a group of first responders or military personnel, whatever it might be, is are you kinder to other people than you are to yourself?
And most of us would say yes.
Most of us would say yes because we've been taught by society to care for everybody else at the expense of ourselves. And I had to learn the hard way. I was raised in a very, very strong environment of volunteerism in the UK. My parents volunteered in so many things until they literally were too frail or sick to work anymore. I'm the same way. I have volunteered most of my life, um, obviously being a chaplain, that's all voluntary. We don't get paid. Some chaplains are paid, but first responder chaplains typically don't get paid.
Yeah.
And I've been a chaplain for years, and I've volunteered these skills for years. But I had to learn to care for myself first. And I think this is where we, as first responders, and I still call myself a first responder because as a chaplain, I respond to everything. but we have to recognize that if we don't put ourselves first and we don't put our own oxygen masks on first, like they tell us to in a flight safety briefing, we're not going to be healthy or well enough or strong enough or even still here to help the other people. But it's hard. It's so hard to not only recognize what it is about our responses to stress within our lives that we have to pay attention to. If we're not paying attention to our personal unique symptoms that our body or mind or emotions or even our behavior will display,
Yeah.
we're not understanding when we have to adjust, right? So
Yeah.
what I say to people is when we notice, earlier I used the expression off kilter. I was just off and I couldn't put my finger on why.
Yeah.
When we recognize there's that shift in us, either mentally or emotionally or behaviorally, spiritually, physically, whatever it is, we actually respond in those 5 main areas that I just mentioned.
Yeah.
If we're not self-aware enough to pay attention to our unique symptoms, which are not negative, they're just giving us information, right? When we have a reaction to something, that's just us receiving information that we need to pay attention. It's a
Yes.
positive message that actually our response mechanisms are working as they were designed to work. But if we're not paying attention to that and we keep ignoring it and we keep pushing forward at the expense of ourselves, we actually are responsible. We are responsible for our own health and safety in that respect. But I've had to change the recording in so many people's minds and hearts because they are so conditioned to ignoring themselves to care for others. And so we really have to change that mentality first.
Yeah.
And then from that, teach people how to recognize signs and symptoms of stress and what to do about it. And change management. It's so encouraging now that management is getting on board with so many of these phenomenal programs.
Yeah.
And there are so many great resources out there across the US. You know, in England, unfortunately, things are changing in England, but they are not as plugged into the programs as they are here in the US.
Yeah.
But things are changing. But I still speak to police officers and firefighters and even military people stationed in England. And there is a lot to be said for international cultures. You know, in England, we have the stiff upper lip, don't show your emotions. There is still that stigma. When I was working in Poland 2 years ago, I was responding to Poland because of the war crisis. And I spent many, many months working in Poland with different organizations. And I was very interested to learn that in Poland, in their Polish language, they didn't have a word for chaplain. It just wasn't a thing.
Hmm.
And now that's changing because so many wonderful organizations have been over to Poland and Ukraine and Romania and even, you know, other surrounding nations to bring in this self-care message and this crisis response message. But what's really interesting is that in that section of Europe, I would say Poland and East, there really was no such thing as crisis management or critical incident stress management training. And the reason why I say that is because when people heard of what I was doing, when I was doing the trainings I provide, they hadn't heard of anything like it before. It was such a new concept to them. So that's why I keep saying that within this country, we're so blessed to have the resources and to have the understanding and to have the people that are passionate about making these changes so that first responders generally are healthier. But you go to other nations and they've not heard of such a thing. And so this is why my international work is so important to me, because I want to provide to them what many people here just take for granted. And it saddens me they take it for granted. the word self-care here has become such a cliche to so many people that
Okay.
if you approach somebody and say, well, do you know about self-care? And they're going to say, oh yeah, we know about that. But
Yeah.
you go to another nation and it's like, no, we don't. Tell us about it. And they're hungry and they want to learn and they're excited to have this information. So there's a lot that needs to be changed. There's a lot of education that needs to still be put out there. But it starts with us. It
Yeah.
really starts with us. No one is going to be responsible for my health but me. No one's going to be
Yeah.
responsible for your health but you. And until we can give people permission to put themselves first, we've lost half the battle.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's just my opinion.
Well, I've seen that too. I've seen, especially over the last 3 years, I really struggled with some of the changes in Washington state law. I struggled with
Yes.
some of the just negative sentiment towards police. And one of my
Yeah.
mentors has said that a number of times is you can't change my happiness. I have to
Yes.
choose to be happy. I mean, you can do certain things that are going to make me more miserable in some cases, but
So true.
just by being a jerk, right? But
Yeah.
you can't make me happy. You could do everything right and I could still be a bitter person. The other thing that you said
Mm-hmm.
there, you were talking about our wellness culture almost. And I'm actually, let's take the word culture away. The some of the self-care and wellness buzz lines. And
Yes.
we hear it so much it gets diluted. And in
Yeah.
reality, we don't actually have the culture. We have a lot of conversation.
Mm-hmm.
There's even a lot of trainings sometimes,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
we don't act, we haven't transitioned to it actually being a culture. And I think the struggle there is since it's not a culture and we hear it all the time, we assume, yeah, I'm doing that stuff. Okay, well, how are you doing it? Well, I went for a walk, 3 weeks ago, or I like to go golfing. That's my hobby. Okay, when was the last time you went golfing? About 2 months ago.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're
Yeah.
not actually doing these things. And what I saw in my career, and I heard you kind of alluding to this, is that change. So I remember the first breathing stoppage I went on when I was a police officer at Linwood over in
Mm-hmm.
Seattle, and
Yeah.
I was racing to get there. I wanted to save a life. The paramedics pulled in before me, and I jumped
Mm-hmm.
out of my car and ran into the house so that I could start CPR before them. That was
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to save a life.
Yeah.
Fast forward to May of 2023, a breathing stoppage kicks out, and I almost didn't go to it. Now, because of my role at the time, they weren't going to dispatch me to it, and I could have
Right.
not gone, and no one would have even asked any questions because that was not the role I was filling at the time. I was supervising our school police officers. But
Okay.
I knew in my heart
Yeah.
that I had a marked car, I was in full uniform, I had an automated external defibrillator in my car, and I had the training, and I was
Yeah.
going to beat everyone there by at least 60 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost didn't go. I had to do the same thing that you were talking about. I had to talk myself into it.
Yeah.
And then I paid the consequence later. I ended up having a lot of
Yes.
alcohol that night because I just didn't like seeing dead
Yes.
bodies. I'd seen so many
Right.
dead bodies through being a
Yes.
detective and being a and here's the thing is I didn't know along the way. I mean, I should have. I should have seen
Mm.
it along the way, the change. I didn't go from racing into the house to almost not going to the call. It took 19 years, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just didn't see
Yes.
the slow fade
Right.
as I came across to this new. How do we train? How do we truly train our folks then? Because none of us are going to be aware of that. It's going to be like the frog in the pot of water that if you change the degrees slowly, eventually you're going to be boiling that pot and the frog's not going to do anything. So how can we train our folks so that they can see the slow fade in themselves and they can take responsibility for their own health?
That's a really good question. And it's funny you use the frog analogy because I was thinking of the same thing as you were talking. Um, so one of the things that, and this is just my perspective, okay? Everyone
Yeah.
out there has got different perspectives, and there's so many brilliant programs out there. But for me, one of the things that I think is really, really important is giving people permission and encouraging them to slow down enough to really do some self-assessments.
Yeah.
We're not good at being introspective. We are so busy, especially in this country. We are so busy that we literally are running from A to B, from dawn to sunset, right?
And then we're on these things when we aren't running from
And
A to B.
we are on our phones and on our devices when we're not running. And for people like me, though, honestly, for people like me, I'm on call 24/7 for probably two or three different organizations. I am never without my phone, and
Yeah.
it is exhausting. I mean, mentally, you know the difference when we switch our phones off and put them down and we go out for a walk without our phones.
Yeah.
Mentally, just that sense of relief and that cleansing breath of de-stressing and unplugging, it makes such a difference. And that's part of what I'm talking about when I say to people, number one, I want you to give yourselves permission to slow down enough for you to be able to start being self-aware. If we are not self-aware, we're ignoring all of those warning signs, those symptoms that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Symptoms are our body, or our mind or our emotions ways of alerting us that something is out of homeostasis, right? We're
Yes.
supposed to be in homeostasis. Those symptoms are positive messages. Not that something positive is going on, but they are positive messages that we need to pay attention to. We shouldn't be afraid of them, because actually, why do we have these messages, Chris? It's because we are wired for survival,
Yes.
right? At all costs, we are wired for survival. So our brain is working overtime 24/7, assessing for threats. That's how we're designed. We are designed to be healthy and to thrive. So when our brain is assessing for threats, mentally and emotionally and physiologically and even spiritually and behaviorally, when we see these warning signs coming up, that's because our brain is saying, hello, something's off balance, something's off kilter here.
Yeah.
And we're heading too far in one direction. So it's slowing down enough to have that introspection, that time of paying attention to what's going on. The other thing is, you mentioned golf. Um, the biggest battle I have when I'm working with clients here is to give them this concept of, it is okay for you to have time for yourself every single day. It actually is not okay. It's imperative that you
Yes.
have time for yourself every single day, because we were not designed at any time through history. Man was not designed to run at the pace we run today. And when you have this constant bombardment with instant information thrown at us through the internet, through television, and through Facebook, I mean, it's just, we weren't designed to live in that kind of environment all the time. It's so toxic. But unless people recognize the fact that they need to put barriers up, unless they have really good boundaries, and people hate that word unless they're really good at boundaries, but unless we have really good boundaries up around our time management and our permission to be self-reflective, we're never going to learn how to care for ourselves. And
Yeah.
so it really starts there. And a lot of people say to me, well, what can I do about this? And what can I do about that? And I have to, they're wanting to fix the problem before they've even recognized what the symptoms are and what the root cause of the problem is.
Yeah.
So I have to bring people way back to, well, hold on a minute. What are your warning signs telling you? First and foremost, how are your warning signs communicating to you? What are they telling you? Let's identify what's causing them. And we need to get way back to that to then start addressing the problem. And the other problem is, because we live in such an instant society, people think they can fix it in a week. No. If you are going off with post-traumatic stress, or if you are diagnosed with post-traumatic stress injury, that's not a 1 week fix. It's taken you years, if not months, to get there. It's going to take you as long to get better. So I want to get people before they crash and burn by educating them and encouraging them to slow down and just be more introspective and self-aware. But it does mean we have to change the mentality and the language of doing for others all the time. It really does.
Yeah. And see, I think that's the difference between a program and a culture. So we have good
Mm-hmm.
programs that can contribute to a good culture. But this is where I see one of the things I would like to see our first responder organizations doing, and they have to buy into it. This is
Yeah.
not, it can't just be the chiefs. It has to be line level officers that are buying into this as well.
Yes, absolutely.
is how can we practice, how can we train turning inward? And I think whether we do it in roll call, at my last agency just before I retired, at the end of shift, typically the squad will wait for each other to come in. And, if someone's a few minutes late, they all wait for each other. Hey, let's just stop.
Yeah, so
Can,
important.
can we spend 5 minutes? Can we spend
Mhm.
2 minutes and do some breath work? Let's spend
Right.
let's spend 2 minutes, and once people get comfortable with the breath work, we spend maybe 3 minutes doing breath work and meditating. And people,
Yeah.
oh, I don't want to meditate. I'm a
Right.
Christian. Well, I'm a
Yeah.
Christian, and Fran's a Christian, and I'm just
Yeah.
telling you throughout Scripture, there's a whole lot of examples of meditating on God's word. And so
Absolutely.
I can meditate and get curious about what's going on within me. Man, why are my shoulders so tight right now? What has happened over the last 24 hours, over the last
Mhm.
24 minutes? I don't know. But
Yeah.
has my body sending out these warning signs to me and saying, hey, right now, we're not doing well. Right now, we're
Right.
really tense. And getting to the root, like you just said, of the symptom. It's not about the tight shoulders. It may not
Right.
even be about the person that was just, I felt like was a jerk to me and I'm upset about. That may have just been the tipping point. And
Yeah.
and I don't know. I like at my last agency, I felt like if I would have tried launching something like this, I would have had a whole bunch of people kind of giving me the look with arms crossed. And I get it
Yeah.
because it's
Yeah.
not part of our culture. But if we could make it part of our culture, I think we could help officers, help these brand new, bright-eyed, super excited,
Yes.
motivated,
Yeah.
hardworking men and women that want to serve our community. Let's help them do it better than you did it, Fran, and that I did it, right? I mean, that's
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
what I want.
Yeah. I hear you. And I love to hear what you're saying, Chris, because that is so important. And you're right, it's not a culture yet. But as we've been talking this morning, I keep thinking back to Roman times. So the Romans were so good at their spas, right? Their baths. They would and I don't mean Romans as in biblical times. I'm talking about although yeah, but even back then, but I'm talking about even more recent times. The Romans were really, really intentional about their spas and their bathing. And actually, even in Germany, there are so many famous German towns that are known for their health spas. And these spas are natural baths with natural springs that have been around for years. And there's this big culture coming from, those maybe 100 years ago, 20 years ago in Europe, where people would congregate and commune at these spas and just sit in the baths and just be,
Yes.
because they believed that the waters would bring health. Well, actually, what they were also getting out of it was downtime, downtime just to sit and to do something for their health. Now, nowadays, actually, I'm going to stay there for a minute, Chris. Back then, there was a really clear understanding of the fact that we are holistic beings. We
Yes.
are mind, body, and spirit. And it was
Yes.
very important in those days for people to have that time to allow their minds and their bodies and their spirit to have rest. And nowadays, certainly with Western modern medicine, although I think things are going back again, but there was a split, wasn't there, from psychological, mental, and spiritual help from the physiological.
Yes.
And so everything became very physiological and treating the physiological symptoms with all kinds of drugs. The reality is we have to pay attention to those other aspects of who we are as human beings,
Yes, we
because
do.
we are one with all of those components pulled together. And people forget that they need to meditate and have times of being mindful. They forget that they need to just slow down 2 or 3 times in the middle of their day and just be present and feel grounded. They forget that it's okay to take a 10-minute walk around the parking lot if you need to get out of the office. And it's all of those little things that we have to do to train ourselves to believe that we're valuable enough and worth the investment within ourselves for ourselves to do this. to make sure we're healthy. And so where does the training start? The training starts with giving people permission.
Yes.
We've got to change the culture, if we're talking about culture, and the belief system in this country specifically. It's okay to take time out. It's okay to have that time to do our breath work. It's okay to take time to just sit silently in a room somewhere without a phone or without a person being with us. It's okay to slow down enough to be introspective and to be aware of our warning signs. I've had 3 major breakdowns in my life, and what I've learned with each one of them is to be more intentional about paying attention to the warning signs,
Yeah.
because actually those warning signs came months before I actually broke down.
Like a
Now I'm going
flashing
to,
check engine light, flashing check
right,
engine light.
right, but we ignore it because we always try, and we all do it, we always try and see how far we can push our bodies,
Yeah.
push our psychological health, push our emotional health. We push the boundaries so far because we're always trying to squeeze out one more day, which becomes one more week, which becomes one more month. And we're just killing ourselves in the process. I mean, we really are.
Yeah.
And it's just not okay. It's just not okay to keep doing that.
That's
And
where our leaders, and when I say leaders, if you're a mom or a dad, you are a leader.
oh yeah,
If you're
for
if
sure.
you're in your organization and you've been there for a bit, which right now being there for a bit is like 5 years. If you've been there for 5 years at a lot of
Yes,
first responder agencies,
yes,
especially police, you got some time comparatively.
yeah. You have
And so modeling this behavior, sergeants, lieutenants,
yes,
commanders, chiefs, if we
yes,
model this behavior to where people see us sitting in our chairs with our eyes closed for a second and just
right.
taking a few deep breaths.
Mm-hmm.
If they see us going for a walk and when someone says, "Hey, what are you up to?" I'm just taking a 5-minute walk because
Yeah.
I needed 5 minutes around the parking lot. And this is
Yep.
really good. Then they're gonna go, "Oh, I can do that. That's socially acceptable within this tribe." Because, like you said,
Yes.
we are very tribal. If there are
Yes.
unwritten rules of you don't talk about this stuff, then
Yeah.
you're not going to talk about it. I think we have to model it after the tough call, the baby death call. I think as a
Yeah.
sergeant or as a lead patrol officer, man, the next day in roll call, look at everyone else and talk about how that made you feel. And you don't got to get very deep
Yes.
with it. All you got to say is, you know what? I had problems going to sleep last night. You know
Yep.
what? I had some indigestion or whatever. Maybe I got home, guys, and I cried for five
Yeah.
minutes. And it's going
Yeah.
to normalize those
So
symptoms,
true.
the check engine lights, and it's going to make it to where we can talk about it and then we can get I think that's going to take us to the next level of, all right, well, what do we do about this? That's the symptom. What's the problem that's actually going on? And what can we do about it as a team to make it so that these symptoms aren't so intense or so that these symptoms will pass sooner than if we just do nothing?
So true. I totally agree with that. And I think one of the things that can help with that, honestly, even though a lot of first responder organizations don't offer this for various reasons, and that is when there has been a really difficult um, call for service that a shift has been on or a crew has responded to. This is where the peer support is so vital, because
Yes.
when we do our one-on-one work with a first responder, or we do our defusings, or we do a formal critical incident stress debriefing, it's in those times, especially the debriefings, when we have an organization that believes in peer support so strongly that they endorse and encourage critical incident stress debriefings for the right reasons. Sometimes they're overdone and sometimes they're not done well due to lack of training. But when they're done well, they actually do create an atmosphere of, guys, we all are in this together. We are all going to experience different symptoms,
Yeah.
from the crying that you mentioned, to the lack of sleep, to the indigestion problems, to the tense shoulders, maybe even to the use of more alcohol, whatever it might be. But that is such a safe place when you have a sort of a when you have set aside a room that is confidential, where people feel safe to come and be real and to air their dirty laundry, so to speak,
Yeah.
that does begin to build a sense of safety. It begins to build a sense of, actually, I have permission to share what I'm going through, because my neighbor Jack just shared that he was crying like a baby last night, and Sally across the room was throwing up, and Mark across the circle has been relying a bit more on the wine or the beer or the whiskey at nighttime. Those are
Yeah.
safe places to have those conversations, because otherwise we're in our stupid silos, aren't we?
Yes.
Not being honest. It has to come down to honesty. And I think what worries me a bit is the fact that people are afraid to be honest.
Well, there,
Because again, there's a
yes.
stigma, isn't there?
Oh, I was told I needed to stop telling my story. This was 2000 and
Mhm.
15 or 16, and I was on the sergeant's list, and I was straight up told by a boss, you need to stop talking about your 2010 story with anxiety and depression. It,
Wow.
it makes you look weak, and you can't be weak as a leader.
Oh my gosh.
Now, again, keep in mind, even then, we weren't there. We weren't where we are now. And that same leader later made
Yep.
some really good decisions for himself as well. And so
Yeah.
I don't think he would make that same comment here in 2024. Um, but I mean, that wasn't that long ago. And I'm
Yeah.
being told as I have these podcast interviews by folks from around the country that there's a lot of agencies where we're still there. Don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Rub dirt on
Absolutely.
it, drink some whiskey, be a tough
Yeah.
man. Even you
Yeah.
women, you better act like a tough man. And
Exactly. Yeah.
and so it's more of these conversations. I think the more we talk about it, the
Mm-hmm.
more, especially with this younger generation, we're
Yes.
going to hopefully change their minds and their attitudes towards taking care of themselves, and then taking care
Yes.
of the group, and then taking care of just continuing to expand out with the rings of care.
Mm-hmm.
And we're gonna do it better. I really think we are. It's just gonna take time.
Yeah. It is going to take time. I think I love what you're sharing. And yes, obviously you and I are on the same page with all of this. The only thing that I am beginning to, and this is going to completely change the direction of this conversation momentarily, but it's what it needs to be said. The only thing I'm beginning to see, and this is potentially a symptom of the pendulum swinging too far the other way,
Yeah.
but it needs to be discussed. The only thing I'm beginning to see is that there, within society over the years, the pendulum has swung to the extreme one way or to the extreme the other way, and
Yeah.
then after a while it comes in the middle. What I'm concerned about is that we are having potentially running the risk of having a lot of very young first responders coming into this type of work, being so encouraged to talk about their stuff that they end up not learning how to suck it up when they need to.
That's a good point. Is in the
So
moment we have to suck it up. In the
we have
moment we
absolutely,
have to
and
focus on the job, flip
we
that
do.
mental switch,
Yes, we
save
do.
lives, make it safe.
Yes.
And then after we do that, now we can sit
Yeah.
there and debrief it, whether it
And
be a
debrief.
operational debriefing or a critical incident stress management debrief
Exactly.
with trained
Yeah.
personnel. Yeah.
And that's what worries me. And I'm beginning to see it. I was just chatting to a friend recently, and um he was talking, he trains at a police academy in a different state. And he was talking about the youngsters that are now coming through have been raised in an environment where there is so much entitlement, and there is so much emphasis on, well, if it doesn't feel good, don't do it.
Yeah.
And we've got that culture coming into first responder world, where we have to now parent them. In some ways we're having to parent them to say, no, actually in this world it's going to be crappy, you're going to see some horrible stuff, it is going to affect you, but you have to suck it up and get the job done. Then we'll deal with it afterwards, but don't come in and say, oh, I'm sorry, I can't take that call because of ABCD. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful, and I know I'm probably saying things that might turn some of your viewers or your listeners off, but it has to be said.
Yeah.
With this push to help people discover their feelings, talk about their feelings, there has to be a clear understanding that because the nature of the world is changing, because there is becoming a lot of darkness is the only word I can really use, certainly in the last few years. And the stress levels are going up
Yeah.
across the whole world for different reasons. We have to be able to withstand what we're going to be going into over the next few decades. So there has to be that inner core of strength. There has to be that inner core of resolve of, we can handle this head on. But again, that has to start with an understanding of how, this is where resilience and resistancy training comes in, which are the new buzzwords, right? We
Yeah.
have to build up that resistance and we have to build up that resilience. But to do it, you have to go through hard stuff.
Yeah.
You never learn to toughen up your muscles if you're not straining them and stressing them and tearing them down and building them up again. It's the same with our resistance and our resiliency to hard stuff we deal with in life. Life sucks sometimes. In fact, I wrote a book on it, what to do when life sucks, because sometimes life is really, really hard. But we can't be we can't be wimps. We have to be tough enough to recognize the hard times head on, stick in our lane, pull our bootstraps off, push through, but then have the discipline and the permission to take time out to address it afterwards. And that's really where we can begin to be more healthy, I think. I don't know. What do you think?
Oh, I totally agree. The image that was coming to my mind was the process of creating a sword. And there's the Bible verse says, "Iron sharpens iron, so does one man
Yes.
sharpen another." But but you also have to sit there and you have to beat that sword into its form.
Yes.
You actually
Yes.
have to scrape it up against something to give it a sharp edge, and it tears
Yes.
away. And when we take that analogy into us as humans, like when I pray for my daughters in the morning. Sorry, girls, if you're listening to this, I don't pray that it's an easy day for you. I pray that God
Right.
protects. I pray that God
Yes.
protects you in the day, and I pray that
Yes.
whatever hardships you might face, that the sharpening is only going to take one time, because
Yeah.
that's what I would prefer for you is to have less, and that you
Yeah.
get the learning points and you mature as a person through the first go around of a struggle. But I know in
Mm-hmm.
my life that that isn't always the case, that sometimes
Right.
it's going to take me a dozen or maybe even 100 times
Yes.
of this hardship before I finally understand. I was abusing alcohol. I was binge drinking on the weekends, Friday, Saturday, and
Yeah.
Sunday. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm like trying to set records with tequila here. And,
Right.
and I honestly didn't think I would stop. I
Mm-hmm.
remember I listened to another podcast, and I'll mention it because I think he's doing great work. Consequence of Habit, JT Frank. And I was listening to his podcast, and he talks a lot about sobriety. A lot of the guests he has on
Mm-hmm.
talk about their road that got there. And I knew in my
Mm-hmm.
mind, Chris, you can't stop.
Right.
You
Right.
can't stop because every Monday morning you think to yourself, that was a lot this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
This next weekend, I need to take a break. But by Friday afternoon, I was starting again because I
Yeah.
haven't done it for 4 days. I really don't have a problem. And
Right.
and so I think I've gone down a rabbit trail with this, but that's the way my brain works sometimes.
There's
It's
nothing wrong with rabbit trails.
Yeah, it's but it all comes together with all this stuff that we're talking about. Hey, Fran, if you don't mind
Yeah.
talking about what are some of the things then that you're doing through your organization? Because I know that you're training both CISM, critical incident stress management, but what are
Mm.
some of these solutions that you're offering outside of your volunteer work, outside of the chaplaincy stuff that you're doing? What are some of the trainings that you're doing to try to help us do better at this?
I I try and always write if I need to write new curriculum, which I do, I try and write new curriculum that is applicable to the organization inviting me in.
Yeah, me as well.
Because within each organization there is a different theme, there is a different, we've used the word culture, there's definitely a different culture within each organization. So I'm always looking at ways to create new material for different organizations that is applicable to their stress load, their workload, the nature of what they're doing. But there is a basic foundation with everything, which are the principles we've already talked about. But other than that, it's really just being present in people's lives as much as I can, whether it's through podcast or through writing my book or through Zoom calls. It's just being present to lead by example. I
Yeah.
think we have to, as you mentioned earlier, if it's not coming from the top down, organizations aren't going to get it. There has to be somebody who's living the example and demonstrating how to walk through some of these difficult things. And so really it's just me trying to live my life in such a way that I can be the example to other people. It's a lot of education. It's a lot of responding. So when I'm the kind of person that likes to see what people's giftings are and encourage them in their giftings. And so because I'm so passionate about what I do, I'm always recruiting people to come with me on this journey through my organizations. So I train people up and I utilize them and I will help deploy other people. But it's just a sense of encouraging people and teaching people how to be present in one another's lives. It's
Yes.
about being present. It's about being connected. It's about paying attention to not only you first, but also what's going on in the lives of people around you. It's about being nosy. Honestly, when I'm training a lot of people, I say, guys, you need to get nosy. There is a time and a place and an appropriate level of nosiness, which it's really caring enough about somebody else and teaching others to do this, no matter what environment you're in, whether it's your work environment, whether it's your family, whether it's at church. It's caring enough about the people around you to know who they are, what they like, what they dislike, how their families are doing, who's in their families. People are so insular, and I used the word silo earlier. People are and organizations have become such silos. And again, I think it's because we hide behind social media, right? But
Yes.
I'm I want people just to come out of the shadows and be honest and be real. And so really that's what my message is all about. I have two organizations and then I volunteer with other ones, but the theme is basically the same. It's be true, be real, be honest to yourself, set the example. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to fall. We're going to learn how to pick ourselves up and dust ourselves off and move forward. In fact, my life's message, if you like, is from my family crest on my dad's side. My dad was a Scot and my mum was Welsh, so I have a lot of Celtic background. But on my dad's side, our family crest has an image of a dead oak tree with a new sprig, a new life coming out of it. And the word underneath is resurgam. And resurgam is a Latin word meaning I shall rise again. And what I love about that is, and that really has become my life message through all of my training, is it's actually the name of my main business, that no matter what life throws at us, we can all rise again. Now, it might take some people longer than others, but if we have the right type of support around us, whether it's from people or from resources, whether we have the right social support in our lives, whether we have the right belief within ourselves that we actually do have internal power, which is God-given, an internal
Yes.
ability to pick ourselves up. Because as I said earlier, we're wired for survival at all costs. We
Yes.
can always get up again. We can always get up again and stand to face another day. It
Yes.
just takes some people longer than others, and it looks different. It looks different from one person to the next. So really that's what I do. I'm always teaching people, yeah, you've been knocked down. Yeah, it sucks. It's crappy. You could be having the darkest, most traumatic, worst season of your life, but you're still alive. Until you are 6 foot under, you will rise up again. It might
Yes.
take you longer than it did last time, and you might need different types of people surrounding you. You might need different resources. You might need different medications. You might need a different therapist, whatever it takes. But you can and you will rise up again. Certainly on my watch, you will.
I love your
Um,
holistic approach to this, though, Fran, because sometimes I'll hear
yeah,
people that really just focus on one area, and everything you've
right,
just said
right.
is my story. I allowed doctors to put me on medication. I found trusted therapists that could train and coach me to do stress management healing work. I
Yes,
had have
yes,
a wife who I trust that I can tell
yes,
everything to. I had so many friends, like when I checked myself into a PTSD recovery center, so many friends mow my lawn and pick up trash from my house and
Hmm.
just step up and write me cards of
Yes.
encouragement while I was there. I mean, I think the reason why I'm sitting here right now and while I still have more work to do, like you said,
Mm.
it took me
Mm.
25 years to get here. I'm not going to get better
Yes.
in
Right.
35 days of therapy, right? Like it's
Right.
I'm going to be
Right.
at this for another 24 and a half years, right? But
Yes.
it's all of that support that has helped allowed me to get to where I'm at now. And I'm
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
functional right now. I'm doing really good. I still have work to do,
Yeah.
but
We all do.
it's because of God. Oh my gosh,
Yes.
this go around in 2023 compared to 2010. The Holy Spirit has been a center point of my
Hmm.
healing. And if you're not a Christ follower, if you don't call yourself a Christian, that doesn't make a lot of sense. But if you get curious with it, man, I'd love to discuss that because the Holy
Mm.
Spirit has just showed up and helped me heal. Um, but
So true.
yeah, we could talk forever, Fran. And part of me
I know.
wants to. Part of me wants to do
I
it in
know.
person because of the beautiful background that you have there in Montana. However,
Well,
I
you're
do have.
welcome anytime. You know that. You know
Oh,
that.
I love it. I may take you up on that sooner than later. Hey, for folks that hadn't heard of you before, Fran, what's the best ways
Yeah.
for them to connect with you?
Thank you for asking. So yeah, I have they can follow me on Instagram. My Instagram name is Fran H. Graham, Graham. I'm on Facebook. I do have a website, franhgraham.com, and they can contact me any of those ways. If they want to get the book, What to Do When Life Sucks, that is available on Amazon. It's actually available in uh, 14 different countries. So if they have other people in other nations that need that book, they can order that on Amazon. And I would love to hear from anybody. I'd love to hear from anybody that has any questions or needs help with training or just needs some how to, what to do next, how to pick yourself up again, how to have your own resurgam moment of I can rise again. I would love to speak to them and hear from them.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Fran. I appreciate you. For the listeners, look down in the show notes. There'll be links for all of the things that Fran just mentioned. Fran, time is my greatest commodity. I can't make more
I
of
know.
this stuff. And you've given me so much of yours, not just today, but in our other conversations, breaking bread together. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Thank you, Chris.
Have a great day.
You too.